Buddy, and welcome to Kids Talk. Today, I'm going to show you some traps in the Budapest Gambit. So without further ado, let's get started. So these traps are for black, and the Budapest Gambit starts with d4, knight f6, c4, and then e5. From here, white has two possibilities. He can either take the pawn or he can move his pawn forward. Let's see what happens if he moves his pawn forward. We're going to cover the other option later on in this video, so make sure to watch this video till the end. Then bishop c5, attacking this weak f2 square. Now, a very common response you'll see from white would be bishop to g5, pinning your knight to the queen. But don't worry. Simply play knight e4. If white becomes greedy and takes your queen, then bishop f2 would be a checkmate in just 5 moves. Wow! Again, going back, if white notices this checkmate, then he's still in big trouble because remember, he also has to save his bishop. He might come up with something like bishop to e3, but after the bishop exchange, the queen can give a check. And now if the pawn blocks, then knight takes pawn, and then if the pawn takes, then we can take the rook and roll up in like solid material. Okay, so those were the tricks when pawn advances. Now most white players would look to capture this pawn to take an early advantage. From here I'm going to show you 2 chess traps. And so let's start with the first one, playing knight g4. Then white brings out. Now from here you have 2 options. You can either play d3 or you can either continue attacking the pawn by playing knight c6. First, let's see d3. Now since white is already a pawn, he can now capture, and he's also getting the opportunity to get his pawns better than these double pawns. So his most obvious move would be pawn takes pawn. Then you capture with your bishop. After white's done his next move, you play the move knight f2, forking the queen and rook. White has no option other than to capture your knight. Then you play bishop g3. Now there's a check to the king and also a discovered attack on the queen. Now white can't go back as the bishop is covering the entire diagonal. So he has no option other than to take. Then you simply take his queen and you're up a queen, which is like a huge advantage. Now let's see the other trick. Okay, so after knight f3, let's say that you play knight c6. Then white will bring his bishop to defend, and then you play bishop b4 check. Now the king can't move, and if white blocks with any of these pieces, then he will lose a defender to this pawn. So he cannot block with the queen because of your bishop, so he has to block with a knight. Moving it to c3 isn't a good option because after you can capture and the pawn recaptures, you'll have doubled up pawns. I know it's very complicated because of so many arrows, I'll tell you what I mean. Now, the most obvious move talking through this strategy is knight d2. Then you play queen e7, putting a third attacker on this pawn. Now, the most common idea for white would be to trap this bishop like this. So, to start off, he'll play a3. But you do not have to move your bishop. Instead, you play knight takes e5. Then, if white takes your bishop, then you can play knight d3. And it's a beautiful smothered checkmate. So going back, you can't take your bishop. If he takes your knight, then you can recapture. Now remember, white can't take your bishop because this checkmate threat still exists. So he'll first have to take your knight, and then after you take the bishop, he can take your bishop. And as you can see, the game is almost even Stevens. So even if white plays everything correctly in this game, still you won't be behind in the game. Okay, so those were some tricks in the Budapest Gambit. Now, in the Budapest Gambit, let's see some traps in the Fireworks Gambit. So it's the same opening basically. d4, knight f6, c4, e5, then d takes c5, and then now the Budapest Gambit is knight to g4, but the Fireworks Gambit is knight to e4. Then you will popularly see three responses from white. One is f3, the second is a3, and then you have knight to f6 to f3. So I'm going to show you tricks and traps in all these variations. Now let's start with f3. This is the worst possible move. Let me show you how. You play bishop b4 check. No matter how he blocks, you play queen h4 check. Only moves that pawn blocks. Then you can take with your knight. Then, if white takes your bishop, then knight e4 would be a checkmate. So going back, he has to take your knight. But then he loses his rook. That's a wonderful checkmate. Now, let's go back and see another variation. Instead of f3, what happens if he plays a normal development move like knight f3? Then you play b6. At first sight, this looks like a horrible move because it's just allowing the queen to come to d5, forking the knight and the rook. But this is our trap. If the queen comes to d5, then you play bishop b7. Now, if white finds something fishy and takes his queen home to play safe, then we already have a huge lead in development. But if he takes your bishop, then he's trapped. Because then you play knight c6. From here, white must be realizing that his queen is getting trapped. Therefore, he can play queen a6. Then you play bishop b4 check. No matter how he blocks, you play knight c5. The queen only has to go to b5 because anywhere else she goes is going to be game over for her. Then you play a6. The queen is trapped and has nowhere to go. So, after she takes and you take back, you're up a queen, which is like a huge advantage. Most players would just resign from here. Now, let's go back and see another move. Okay, so after knight takes e4, what if he plays a3, preventing our bishop from checking the king? Then you play the same thing. b6, queen d5, bishop b7, then queen takes b7, knight c6, and then queen a6. But this time you do not check the king with your bishop like this, because the pawn is already blocking the queen from escaping. So you simply proceed by playing knight c5, queen b5, and then a6 wins the queen again. Okay, so that was the Budapest Gambit. If you like this video, then like. If you're absolutely new to chess, then you can watch my basic intro video that's on your left. In the middle, there's a subscribe button. You can click on it and subscribe to my channel. And on the right is a video that is best for you.